radiation alarm on Kalen's wrist hummed a low, steady vibration that felt like teeth against his bone. His skin was already beginning to prickle, 1,000 invisible needles searching for a way through the seams of his pressurized suit. Across the jagged obsidian plains of Sector 07, High Arbiter Vaxen stood encased in a shimmering field of pure kinetic energy, looking less like a living being and more like a statue carved from light. Vaxen didn't feel the grit. He didn't feel the way the wind tried to scour the marrow from a man's ribs. To the Arbiter, this was a calculated observation. To Kalen, it was the familiar heavy burn of staying alive. In fact, the trial had started long before the first lungful of toxic air. It began in the Crystal Spire, under the cold, judgmental eyes of the Zenith Conclave. Kalen had stood on floor plates so polished they looked like frozen water, his boots scuffed and out of place. It was there to demand apex grade status, a recognition that Terrans weren't just another labor species to be managed and filed away. Vaxen had laughed then, the sound like glass shards rattling in a metal tray. He looked at Kalen's stocky frame, the scars on his knuckles, and the way his chest moved with the heavy, rhythmic necessity of breath. The Arbiter found the request an adorable overreach. He mocked the Terran biology, calling it a collection of wet pipes and brittle sticks. "You claim a seat among the architects," Vaxen had said, his voice echoing through the vaulted hall. "But you are a mayfly, with the heart of a supernova. Short-lived, volatile, and far too loud for your own good." Kalen hadn't looked away. He had seen worlds that would make these ancient beings crumble into dust. He knew the elegance of a blade meets the stubbornness of a stone in every human heart. He simply told them that they didn't just inhabit worlds, they outlasted them. The challenge was issued with a sneer, a trial of merit on Sector 07. If Kalen could survive 48 hours on the surface without the help of the Conclave's stabilizing tech, the status would be debated. Vaxen went along to witness the failure. Wrapped in his high-tech Aegis field, a bubble of perfect climate control that kept the universe at a polite distance. Now, 6 hours into the trial, the sky was a bruised purple, and the first hyperstorm was rolling in from the Iron Mountains. The wind carried the scent of scorched copper and static. Kalen adjusted the seal on his neck, feeling the heavy thud of his heart against his ribs. It was a rhythmic, stubborn sound. He was searching for a home where survival isn't a full-time job, but until he found it, he knew how to work. Ironically, Vaxen's shield began to flicker. The Arbiter didn't notice at first. He was too busy recording the erratic telemetry of Kalen's failing life support. But Kalen saw it. He saw the way the blue light of the Aegis pulsed, struggling against the sheer density of the radiation. The Conclave relied on tools. They had forgotten what it was to have the pressure of the world pushing back against your skin. A sharp crack echoed across the flats, not from the storm, but from the Arbiter's harvester drone as it plummeted, its circuits fried by an unexpected surge in the atmosphere. The high-tech gear was failing. The single point of failure was screaming, and the storm was only just beginning. The Aegis field didn't just fade, it shattered like a glass bulb under a heavy hammer. 1 second, Vaxen was a god encased in a bubble of serenity. The next, the atmosphere of 07 rushed in to claim him. The Arbiter gasped, a sound of pure terror as the freezing, chemical-laden wind ripped the breath from his lungs. His skin, never exposed to anything harsher than a climate-controlled breeze, began to redden instantly. But Kalen was already moving. He didn't wait for his suit's sensors to tell him the danger. He felt it in the soles of his boots. The ground was vibrating. Something large was moving through the iron dust clouds, something that didn't need electronics to hunt. Out of the purple haze, a null shredder lunged. It was a mass of obsidian plating and multi-jointed limbs, evolved to crack open the shells of mineral-rich tortoises. Vaxen was just soft meat in a broken casing to it. The Arbiter's hands clawed at his useless wrist comp, his eyes wide and vacant. He was a creature of logic and light, and here, logic had died. Kalen didn't use a laser. The interference from the storm would have scattered the beam anyway. Instead, he pulled the heavy, serrated combat knife from his thigh, a piece of cold, forged steel. It was the elegance of a blade meeting the stubbornness of a stone. He tackled the Arbiter, rolling them both into a shallow crevice just as the Shredder's claws whistled through the space where Vaxon's head had been. The impact jarred Kalen's teeth, sending a sharp spike of heat through his shoulder. He ignored it. Pain was just data. It was a reminder that he was still in the fight. In fact, the Shredder was fast, but it wasn't used to prey that fought back with redirected momentum. When the beast lunged again, Kalen didn't retreat. He stepped into the strike, driving the steel upward into the soft, unarmored joint of the creature's primary limb. He used the beast's own weight against it, a trick learned on a world where even the gravity tried to kill you. The creature shrieked, a sound that bypassed the suit's audio filters and vibrated directly in Kalen's skull. He didn't let up. He was a void stalker now, a predator from a Class 9 death world where every breath was a victory. He stayed close, stayed low, and carved a path of survival through the dark. When the storm finally broke 12 hours later, the rescue shuttle found them huddled in the lee of a massive basalt pillar. Kalen was awake, his helmet visor cracked, his hand still gripped tightly on the hilt of his knife. Vaxon was wrapped in Kalen's own thermal emergency blanket, shivering but alive. The Arbiter looked at the human with a new, quiet kind of horror, the kind that comes from realizing you've spent your life mocking a hurricane. Back at the Crystal Spire, the silence was different. It wasn't the silence of judgment, but of awe. Vaxon stood before his peers, his face still marked by radiation burns that no medbay could instantly erase. He didn't use the telemetry. He didn't show the logs. He simply looked at Kalen and spoke into the vast, shimmering hall. "We were wrong," Vaxon whispered, his voice steady for the first time. "We built a galaxy of glass and wondered why it broke. This man, his people don't just inhabit worlds. They outlast them. The Conclave didn't just grant the status. They did something they had never done for a species they once considered a collection of wet pipes and brittle sticks. They stood. Kalen didn't smile. He just felt the weight of his own heart, heavy and stubborn, finally finding a place where it didn't have to fight quite so hard. "Would you like me to generate an image of Kalen standing before the Conclave? Or perhaps the moment the Shredder emerged from the storm?"